eyes made his stomach curdle like he'd swallowed sour milk. "Sleeping," he said, proud that he sounded defiant rather than scared. Dolan gave a sharp bark of laughter and approached the bed. "That ain't sleep, boy. She's unconscious. You need a doctor." That's what John thought too, but he didn't have the money to pay one, even if he could convince one to come to Pigeon Alley, one of the most unsavoury parts of St. Giles. "But I reckon that would be throwing away money," Dolan said. "A quack would just tell you to take your leave of her." He tried to pat John on the shoulder, but John flinched away before the man could touch him. "Why so skittish, young lad?" Dolan asked in a voice he probably meant to be friendly, but John saw the greedy, nasty glint in his eyes. John couldn't think of anything to say, so he just shook his head. Dolan glanced around their small, gloomy lodgings, his gaze settling on Gran's sewing bag, the only item of value in the room. The scissors in the bag, which John wasn't allowed to touch, were Gran's prized possession. Without them, she'd not be able to do her work. There was also a thimble, some sharp needles in a little tin box, and a leather pouch that contained something John had never seen, because his Gran had stitched it shut. "This is yours," she'd said when he'd asked what was inside. "Why can't I open it?" he'd asked more than once. "Some day you will." "When?" "Some day." That was all he could get out of her. Even though he'd been curious for years, now he couldn't bring himself to care about whatever was in the pouch. His eyes slid back to Gran, and he knew with sick certainty that she'd die if he couldn't get a doctor. John wished he could ask his Gran what to do, but it was down to him. He was the man of the family. "I have something, maybe enough to pay a doctor," John blurted before he lost his nerve. Dolan's eyes glittered with interest. "Oh?" "Gran's scissors." He half expected her to leap from the bed at his suggestion, but she didn't even twitch. "Let me see them," Dolan said, no longer smirking. Maybe he wanted to help. John needed somebody to help. He dug around in the bag, pushing aside some bits of cloth, a small notebook that Gran had kept, even though she couldn't read, her needle tin, the leather pouch, and at the bottom of the bag was the thick felt case with the scissors. John glanced at his Gran as he took them from the bag. Normally he'd never be so bold, but she didn't even shift on her cot when he handed the valuable item over to Dolan. Dolan unwrapped the felt and held the fancy-handled scissors closer to the smoky tallow candle. "These are fancy. She must have pinched 'em." "Gran don't steal!" John shouted, even though he'd wondered how she'd afforded such a nice pair. Dolan chuckled. "Calm down, lad. I was just teasing. These'll be enough to get Fian over here to take a look." Fian was a butcher who lived several streets away and had once lanced a boil on John's knee. He was a filthy, frightening mountain of a man, but Gran had summoned him for that, so she obviously trusted him. John held out his hand for the scissors. "Nah, you don't want to go out on the street with something so rum, do ye?" That was true, but John also didn't want to leave anything valuable, or rum, to use Dolan's street cant, with the unpleasant little man either. "Just tell the butcher that Jake Dolan says you can pay." John hesitated, not liking the thought of leaving the scissors or his Gran, but what choice did he have? "You want me to sit here while you go? Keep her company?" Dolan's kind offer made John feel bad, but he didn't like or trust the man. He nodded again, and then forced himself to speak up like a big lad, like Gran always said, "Thank you." Dolan took the chair where John had been sitting. "Go on now, I'll watch her. You best be running." John turned and ran. It took John almost 3 hours to track down Fian, who wasn't at his shop, but at a rat pit on the far edge of St. Giles. The huge butcher wouldn't leave with John until the terrier he'd put